What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Ben Burnett, and joining me for the first time in a long time, my pal and yours, Jesse Severe of the Fantasy Hockey Life Podcast. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you doing on this fine Thursday evening, closer to the weekend?
Hey, Ben, I'm doing great, man. I'm trying to keep above zero down here in Wisconsin. I can't even imagine Canada at this point.
It's covered in snow, we're like stereotypical Canada, and we haven't been stereotypical Canada for a while. So it's kind of, I don't mind it.
All right. Well, we're quickly moving to the too cold to snow category. That's never where you want to be.
That's a good point. And as the listeners know, and as you know, Jesse, this is the show that we try and jam as much hockey talk and headlines and fantasy hockey updates as we can into as short of a shift as we can possibly do. So let's get into the topics. And I actually wanted to start not with a team, not with a player, but I wanted to talk about a subject we teased on our last show, which is the NHL's massive new announcement of an updated schedule, including about 100 rescheduled games due to COVID postponements through the first 4 months of the league season, mostly added throughout February when the Olympic break was expected to fall. Of course, NHL teams no longer heading to the Olympics in February. Instead, what we're seeing is a ton of games pushed into the month of February, clearly leaning towards teams that missed out on games earlier in the season. We're seeing a ton of games for Edmonton, Ottawa, Toronto. The Islanders have a bunch of new games in there. And I wanted to talk about this because, Jesse, like in a usual season, you're going to see teams at this point of the year, there starts to be a bit of a games played disparity. So you start to look at teams that have more games left in their schedule as potential trade targets. And I think that this year, more than ever, we're seeing a larger disparity. And I'm noticing that this is creating some fantasy opportunity, I guess, for those who are looking to buy. So, Jesse, I'm going to run through a couple of teams that have a massive jump in their games played through the rest of the fantasy regular season. And then I'm going to throw it to you to talk to us about the fantasy hockey playoffs for those who want to look ahead. First of all, do you have any sort of like overarching thoughts when you saw this update? Anything about the schedule change that bears mentioning?
Well, I don't think we've ever seen this big of a spread in total games left to go at this point in the season as we do this year. And so normally you're talking about nickel and dime of a couple little things different. This year, there's a huge spread. So this is really one that you need to pay attention to, or you're going to lose some mathematical advantage as we get to the end of the season. That's
exactly right. And I think that, you're right. It's like usually we'll see like a 5, maybe 6 game play disparity from the top to the bottom of the league. At this point this year, there is like an 11 game disparity between the Islanders and Ottawa. If you look at the scheduler, you will see that the Ducks, Tampa Bay, Nashville, the Rangers, Washington, Vegas, San Jose, these teams have about 40 games or more played. There are a couple more around 39. Really, the whole league is kind of in this like high 30s to low 40s numbers. So a massive jump, massive disadvantage if you are stacked up on teams at the top. And you should be looking, I think we can both agree, for the teams that have more games played. I wanted to go a bit deeper, though, because if you look ahead, there are also this year more than usual a lot of games that are falling outside of the fantasy schedule. This kind of happened at the end of last year. Folks may forget that due to some of the postponements, a ton of games ended up happening outside the fantasy season. So that's why I wanted to split it up, where we're going to look at Yahoo's regular season. We're going to look at Yahoo's playoffs, starting with the regular season. And I think that the first thing I want to say is that there is a massive difference between leagues that are going to have 4 separate matchups for the weeks of February, like those on Fantrax and CBS Sports, and the Yahoo leagues, where we are going to see a 3 to 4 week, I guess a 4-week matchup with what should have been the Olympic break, unless Yahoo has a massive change of heart. And there are some massive games played disparities just in that matchup. In particular, the aforementioned Tampa Bay Lightning play just 6 games in week 16. So I think that I want to say if you are a team who needs to win every game on their way through the rest of the regular season just to make the playoffs, then you might want to look at trading away some of your Tampa Bay Lightning players ahead of that 4-week matchup. And teams that you may want to target, I'm looking in particular at Canadian teams here because Edmonton has 13 games, more than double the amount of games that Tampa Bay has. Ottawa has 13 games. Toronto 12, Columbus and Calgary both with 11, and then a ton of teams at 10. So Lewis, I'm gonna pause here for a second, and I guess I want to look at those two teams at the top and at the bottom. I'm gonna say Ottawa and Tampa Bay. You know, a player like Brady Tkachuk has been underachieving so far. It's been a rough start. He's been a little cold lately. I guess I'm wondering if you were holding on to a Tampa Bay Lightning player not named Nikita Kucherov, who I think has been so good. He'll be fine in those 6 games, probably about as good as any other player in the league over 12. But let's look at a player like Braden Point or a player like Steven Stamkos. Would you swap Steven Stamkos for Brady Tkachuk? And I'll give you the full season scope here. Not only does he get an extra 7 games in the Week 16 matchup, but Brady Tkachuk over the rest of the season, 10 extra games over Steven Stamkos. What do you think?
I think that's definitely a sale that you could convince me of to try to make that change, even though I think it's a slight, it's really a lateral move. Everybody knows how much I love Brady Tkachuk and Steven Stamkos. Brady would have gone ahead of him, I think, straight up in an even updraft at the beginning of the season. But, you know, the other element of this, Ben, that you bring up, there's kind of two sides of this. One of them is you can say Ottawa's got 10 more games left. The other is you can say 7 of those games come in that one matchup. So if you're liking a couple and trying to win every week matchup, almost all of that goodness is being squeezed into 1 week. After that week and through the last weeks of the season that count, Ottawa and Tampa have the same number of games. So once you get past that all of February matchup, these teams' differences are evened out. I mean, it's so hard to tell. So, you know, going in all in on that, you will help to have a super advantage for that one ginormous matchup. And by the way, make that, you know, those pickups before that month where you can only make 4 ads or whatever like that. But it's worth it if you are to the point, like you said, where every single win is going to count for a ton.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And probably there are teams that are going to need that Week 16 win much more than others. I'm thinking of my team in the Cupful, where we're trying to, you know, I'm 3-0 with Nikita Kucherov in the lineup. I'm trying to get back up into the playoff contention, but I'm going to need that Week 16 matchup. And no, I am not going to trade Nikita Kucherov in that league because I don't care about the 6-game schedule. He is going to be just fine. But yeah, players like Brady Tkachuk, players like Drake Batherson, players like Josh Norris, very interesting if you're able to get them for cheap. Why don't we jump ahead though? Let's look into the playoff schedule here, Jesse, which you took a look at for us.
Playoff schedule gets interesting once again because there's only 2 teams that have 3 straight 4-game weeks, and that's in the format that we're playing in Cupful, where it's weeks 21 through 23 that are the playoff weeks. Those are, believe it or not, the St. Louis Blues and the Buffalo Sabres. None of those Canadian teams, because a lot of those Canadian rescheduled games are hitting in that week 16, in that break that's coming there. So that's where you really see those things swell up. So those are 2 teams that you definitely want to look at, but you also want to be thinking about the quality starts in those weeks. And then, I mean, St. Louis, actually 6 of their 12 starts are quality. And Winnipeg additionally has 7. So there's a couple of the teams that you would be looking at extremely strongly. On the flip side of that, New Jersey, 0 quality games. Not only for the playoffs, but only 2 in the 3 weeks preceding the playoffs. So New Jersey, man, unless you got a star from one of those teams, just don't count on them to be able to make up those off-night games from now until the end of the season.
When you talk about a quality game, Jesse, can you tell me what you mean by that?
I'm looking at the off-night games per Yahoo week in the, I guess this is some kind of Cupful tool that's out there, right? Where did we get this sheet from, Ben?
I found this sheet on Reddit, and it's basically it's a scheduling sheet. It just breaks it down by games per Yahoo week, and then there's an off night games per Yahoo week tab.
And it counts as fewer than half the teams playing games on those nights. So it's going to be
so you're looking just at the off nights when you say quality games.
Yeah, I'm talking about the off night games because those are going to be critical for streamers. I'm channeling our buddy Dave Betton here. Cousin Dave, I believe is called absolutely. In these quarters, because those are the types of things I already want to be thinking ahead about.
That's a great point. So I think looking at San Jose or St. Louis, looking at Buffalo, those are two teams that I'm definitely wanting to target ahead of the fantasy playoffs. Any names that stand out to you as possible targets there?
Boy, Buffalo is so hard to read because they had a few guys who came up early in the season. With that many quality games, let's face it, what you are going to be looking at most likely at the end of the season is going to be the streamers on those two teams. And they're streamers that you're going to want to come into the playoffs with for those first matchups if you have them, because again, 7 of those off night games for St. Louis, 6 for Buffalo over the course of the playoffs. So, in a lot of ways, we're still talking about the stars. And then when we get to those last couple of weeks, we're talking about bringing in the, Dylan Cousins, Tage Thompsons of the world and seeing what kind of magic you can make happen on a short-term basis, or what injury frees up some great power play time for somebody. And I know there's one guy that we're going to talk about this episode who also might be on my list for that.
That's right, Jesse, and we are going to chat about a few more players, get into our usual headlines when we come back from a quick commercial break. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Jesse, we are moving into the second half of our program, and we have a few headlines that I want to kind of breeze through here and a few players that I want to dig deep on. I guess let's start with some of these injuries and outjuries that we're talking about. First of all, Nikolai Ehlers is now out for 2 games thanks to a knee-on-knee check from Dmitry Orlov. Orlov's banned for 2 games for the infraction. The Jets have added Ehlers to their injured reserve list. They seem to expect he'll miss the short term at the very least, if you're listening to sort of the way that they've been talking about this injury. In the meantime, it looks like Paul Stastny will get first crack at that spot, and the Jets have an interesting schedule rest of the week. It's Thursday night as we record this, so nobody's going to hear this in time to get Stastny in for tonight, but they do play again. They play 3 times in the next 4 nights, including a back-to-back this weekend, one of the very few Saturday-Sunday schedules in the league. I wish I could recommend Stastny wholeheartedly, but things could change again because Blake Wheeler does appear to be coming back to the lineup this weekend. So Stastny may get bumped very quickly, but I guess I'm wondering, Jesse, does Stastny stand out to you as a streamer? He's also recently back from the IR list.
Man, Stastny just doesn't stand out for me in any particular way, except as a sore thumb on my roster that always irritates me a little bit in Dynasty. I think he's a fine flyer if you really need to take somebody. Personally, the guy who excites me in that Winnipeg Jets lineup, who scored his first goal the other night against my Washington Capitals, was Cole Perfetti. He also, Perfetti, that is, got a lot of good playing time that first night, playing with likes of Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois. So I'd really like to see that going forward a little bit here in the near future. But Paul Stastny, you know what he is. He's always there. And if he does get that time, don't expect great production, but at least decent context.
That's a great point. And I think I would, just looking at even strength lines, I agree that Perfetti looks more interesting than Stastny to me. But I will say that if Stastny ends up on the top power play, as they sometimes have him up there, I could see riding him for the weekend at least. Perfetti, I agree. Actually, that's a great recommendation. While we mentioned the Washington Capitals, I kind of wanted to get your opinion while you're on the show, Jesse. You are our resident Washington Capitals fan, I guess, around these parts. And I wanted to ask you about Vanecek, a player I streamed in today after I read that Coach Laviolette was playing him tonight against Boston. Real opportunity for this one to blow up before even the show is released, but let's see what happens. And Laviolette said that this is a chance for Vitek to find consistency and take the reins. I guess I'm wondering, A, what's going on with Ilya Samsonov? And B, do you think that Vanecek can kind of make a play and turn into a starter on this team?
Well, as I like to say, Vitek, Vanecek, give a dog a bone. That's my favorite call out for Mr. Vanecek. He does seem to have taken the reins on this team. He has outplayed Samsonov so far this year. You are right. He has already given up a goal in the first half of the first period tonight against the Bruins. That's all right. David Pastrnak, there's no shame in giving up a goal to that guy. Yeah, Vanecek was supposed to be the afterthought coming back into this year, the guy that they gave up in the expansion draft and picked up through a kind of a scrub trade. But it's darn good thing they got him back because Samsonov has not looked the part.
And so I just am surprised because I know that Samsonov was supposed to be like the guy, and that, the three Russian goalies come over, Shesterkin, Sorokin, and Samsonov, and Samsonov's been the slowest to kind of put it together in the NHL.
Yeah, Samsonov had his first year was very good when he played just a little bit. Second year, multiple stints on the COVID list. And then this year, who the heck knows what's going on? And you look at that, 19 games started this year, 13 wins, 14 losses, and 3 overtime losses, which basically is identical to last year and very similar, if not a better percentage record than his first year, but a .903 save percentage. And if you go through and actually look at those 13 so-called wins, I guess they're not so-called, they were real wins. I went through because I hate myself, and I looked at each one of them to figure out how many games he had saved more than 23 shots. 30 is about the average that an NHL goaltender should face in a game, and had an above league average save percentage for that game, which is .908 is the NHL save percentage. There were three games that he did that, and they weren't even all wins. The Capitals have really buoyed him through their strong start to the year, which seems to be fading now with the health. So Samsonov is a problem. His surface stats still look pretty nice there. If you want to go just the straight quality start percentage on Hockey Reference, it's .368. That is just horrendous for quality start percentage. So you can't trust Samsonov right now, and I think the Capitals are saying the same thing by trying to give Vanecek as much run as they can.
All right, Jesse, it's nice to have that Washington insider perspective from you. Let's go over to some outjuries, talk about some good news, I guess. And this is a nice little topic for you to be on for, because your show with Victor Nuno, the Fantasy Hockey Life, wonderful prospect analysis. So let's talk about Quinton Byfield, who is back up with the Kings, slated to start tonight, just his 7th NHL game. I read that he had a slow start to the AHL return this year after nursing a broken ankle and returning from the COVID-19 list. I guess I'd love to hear your perspective, Jesse, in one-year leagues. Should people get excited about Quinton Byfield? I know, keeper leagues, you should be all over him, but what's your hype level for Quinton?
Well, I know, my partner, Victor Nuno, thinks of Byfield as maybe the number one prospect who came out in the year that he did. And certainly there is a lot of positivity ahead of him, I don't know that he's going to be a tide turner in your leagues this year. I probably would pick him up in something reasonably deep like the Cupful as somebody that I would take a chance on here for a little while, but playing that center position and with a sort of mediocre offensive situation in LA, I'm not thinking he's going to turn the tide. But hey, you could have much less fun other ways than by picking up Quinton Byfield and just kind of betting on the rookie, because he's going to be special in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Jesse, we just have a couple of streaks to get into before we finish up. And you kind of alluded to this player a bit earlier. It's a player in Buffalo and somebody who is still fairly widely available in Yahoo leagues. Alex Tuch has been absolutely fantastic for the Sabres since returning from injury. On a bit of a hot streak here with 7 points in 7 games since returning, getting primo deploymento on those Sabres. Top line, top power play, adding a hit and 2 or 3 shots per game. Those percentages are high. The underlings, his on-ice shooting percentage, his IPP. He's definitely outperforming what I think we should be expecting. I don't see him as an 80 point per game guy, but could he be a 60, 65 point guy? That seems fairly reasonable to me. I kind of think of him as someone who could be kind of what Victor Arvidsson is in his strong stretches, though probably fewer shots, but better hits to kind of make up for that lack of shooting.
I think that's totally fair. Yeah, Tuch is, he's finally getting to play in his hometown region once again, up there with Buffalo. He wants to be up there. Maybe some people think of him still as kind of a prospecty type guy. I don't know what the perception is. He's not. He's 25 years old. He should be in his prime. It's just that he's not been able to play as consistently because he gets hurt a lot, and he was kind of pushed down a little bit in that Vegas situation. But yeah, I mean, all year I think we've been waiting for some people to rise up a little bit on the Buffalo Sabres because we've had our Tayshaun and Dylan Cousins, but Jeff Skinner and Victor Olofsson have kind of left me wanting anyway. So maybe Alex Tuch will be able to make a difference on that power play and give Buffalo fans something a little bit to hope for. And like you said, with 6 quality games, 12 total starts in your 3-week playoff, he is totally a guy that you want to be riding into the last month of the season with if you can.
Yeah, I think Tuch was kind of a victim of his own talent in Vegas, where he can drive a line on his own. You can throw him on line 3 and he'll go out there and provide you really quality minutes on a line that would otherwise be stagnant without him on the ice. Throw him on a team like Buffalo, though, where he's not behind, Mark Stone and some of the better wingers in the league, and all of a sudden you're giving him top line, top power play minutes. I'm very interested to see what he can do. So yeah, I see Tuch as somebody who should probably be rostered in all 12-team leagues and 14-team leagues. Certainly 14-team leagues, probably at least bangers leagues that are any shallower. Looking at his rostership percentage, only 24% rostered, still behind guys like Jesse Puljujärvi, Jakub Voracek, Jeff Carter, Ryan Johansson, Alex Radulov, Jonathan Taves, Patrick Hornquist. The list, unfortunately, does drag on. I had to stop there. I would drop all those guys for Alex Tuch at this point. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Oh boy, you named some decent names there, but I certainly think Alex Tuch would be competitive with all the guys that you're talking about, and especially with the premium position that you're going to get with him. I definitely like to be able to see that left-right winger eligibility that you're going to get on Yahoo with him. Gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of options for those weeks when you do have those flexible rosters and multiple off-night games with Alex Tuch. So, yeah, man, why not? Let's believe in it. YOLO. The Alex Tuching has come.
I think like Puljujärvi and Carter, I can see an argument. Personally, I think with Carter's new deployment, I lean Tuch, and Puljujärvi just hasn't shown me that he can be somebody who drives his own numbers and that you can rely on for a full season. But I will add, though, just on the topic of Buffalo, this does seem to come at the detriment of Victor Olofsson, who is now ice cold, no points in his last 5 points over his last 15, and now getting second power play minutes, which to me is the point of having Victor Olofsson, is to put him on that right circle or the opposite Ovi side, the left circle. Fires a mean shot when the puck movement is doing well, and he doesn't really drive play at even strength. So I don't really understand it, but Victor Olofsson down on second power play, probably a drop in all but the deepest dynasty formats at this point. I don't think that's very controversial, Jesse. Am I freaking you out with that take?
Well, I mean, no. I guess I've never been as high of a believer on Olofsson as many others have, because it's kind of a late breakout when he came into the NHL. I think somebody probably could go up to the KeyBank Center and tell them they're allowed to have 2 offensively talented people at the same time on their team. So theoretically, they should be able to coexist. But you're right, for some of the play reasons that you're talking about, there could be a bit of redundancy between the two. So, yeah, Victor Olofsson is not somebody that I'm necessarily targeting. But again, we don't know what's going to happen late in the season. We don't know how hard Buffalo is going to be playing vis-a-vis other teams that may be fully in the tank by then. And maybe Olofsson is a guy that you're going to want to hold on to for that stretch run if he's able to provide even modest production.
And looking at an Anaheim Ducks player, Trevor Zegras, fairly cold since returning from the COVID list. Just 4 points in his last 6, but all 4 of those points coming in only 2 games. So we're seeing 4 pointless games in his last 6. Contrast that to prior to hitting the IR. Zegras was coming off a stretch where he had put up 20 points in 17 games. We did receive a question on Twitter at ShortShiftKK from a manager who has Tyler Toffoli on the IR. Toffoli back with a point and a goal and an assist last night in his first game back in action for Montreal, asking us if we would drop Zegras or Travis Konechny to bring Toffoli off of the IR list. So I guess basically, if you can keep two of these three. Would you drop either Zegras or Konechny? Cold Zegras and I guess suddenly somewhat resurgent Travis Konechny in Philadelphia?
It's incredibly rough. I am not sure at this point. Tyler Toffoli was so excellent last year, but Montreal is just such hot garbage at this point. They're the lowest scoring team in the National Hockey League, and it's by 1/10 of a goal. And yeah, they're doing a lot of that without Tyler Toffoli, but I cannot bring myself to drop Trevor Zegras. He's still playing with Getzlaf and Raquel on some top deployment, and I do think that there's going to be a resurgence. He's a rookie. There's going to be inconsistency, but I think that he could heat right back up, and I don't want to be the guy who watches my biggest rival pick him up off the waiver wire and destroy me after I gave up on him this week.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think if there's one thing I'm taking from this stretch is just that, like, okay, probably point per game, Trevor Zegras has not arrived in the NHL. Like, over a full season, there are going to be some valleys, I guess. It's not all peaks. But I do agree that he's probably already worth holding on to through his cold stretches, which is not what I expected to be saying preseason. So I am very happy to see how well he's been doing, and I'm hoping that he can get back to his pre-COVID form shortly.
I will say, just to throw cold water back on myself, that Anaheim is one of those teams that doesn't have many games left relative to the others. 35 That's games right. left in the season is the second lowest to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So while Montreal really doesn't have that many more either, Anaheim is not necessarily a team that's going to be flush with starts for here on out to the rest of the season. Philadelphia is really not that much better. So it's kind of pick your poison. I don't think that's necessarily going to turn the tide from you on any of these three players. But Trevor Zegras, I think, is going to have a resurgence, but probably won't be as dominant as players from some of these other teams.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Jesse, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight and for answering all of my probing questions on fantasy hockey. Why don't you tell our listeners how they can find your work?
Well, you should hook up with us at Fan Hockey Life is my Twitter address. You can hit me there in the fantasyhockeylife@gmail.com is the way you can email Victor and I. You can join our Discord as well. Just hit us up and let us know. But I always love being here with you, Ben. It's been a great time.
Thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we have you back on the show soon. And thank all of our listeners for listening tonight. Be sure to give us a follow at ShortShiftKK. Join Brian and Elon on Twitter at Keeping Carlson and Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. I'd recommend you all follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News for all of your latest breaking fantasy hockey updates. And you can always visit the websites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Trick, and Cacupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep those shifts short.